Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we're just doing a crochet with me video as I talk to you about some of the most common romance tropes in novels. As a romance writer myself, I am guilty of writing some of these tropes. And I just wanted to dive into some of them because I do think that some of them are just overdone and they're done incorrectly. And I'm just going to be talking about 5 of them. And also, I'm going to be giving my opinion on a very well known novel that might get me some hate. If you are familiar with the ACOTAR series, or if you're not, Court of Thorns and Roses is a very popular romance fantasy novel that was written by Sarah J. Maas. It spans, I don't even know how many books are in that series right now, but it's still ongoing. It's very long, and you either love it or you hate it. So I'm going to start with going into the first romance trope, and just FYI, these are just all my personal opinions. The first one is one of my favorites. It is the enemies to lovers trope. Now, I love me a good enemies to lovers, but so many of the novels nowadays aren't actually enemies to lovers. It's more like I hate you for some reason and then we just fall in love. To be a real enemies to lovers, there has to be like some big problem that happens, some big hatred, some like I want to kill you kind of vibe going on. Not just this like, oh, he said something mean to me, he was rude to me, he made fun of me, blah blah blah, and now we're enemies. No, that doesn't count as enemies to lovers. And one of the things I'm going to be referencing Sarah J. Maas because I think so many people already have read it, or if you haven't, um, sorry. But in Sarah J. Maas ACOTAR, she does a pretty good job, I think, of showing that enemies to lovers trope, specifically with Rhysand and Farah. So she did hate him in the beginning, I think. And it was executed well. I'm trying not to give too many spoilers for those that didn't read it, but she executes that enemies to lovers trope well. I have read so many novels where they claim to be enemies to lovers, and it's just no. I Either they become lovers way too fast, that there is not enough hate, there's not enough to back up that trope. There is not enough backstory. If you hate somebody, you're gonna need more than just a couple of chapters to suddenly fall in love with them, right? Like, take for example, any random Joe Schmo and some random Jane off the street. Like, you need more. You need to have some kind of basis to be able to call it enemies to lovers. And I have tried writing enemies to lovers in the past. I actually did write one. And although I do say it's enemies to lovers because they come from a family that hates each other, that are not on good terms with each other, they themselves have never met, and their hatred of each other is purely based on everything that they've heard. Let me reference something that is not actually a book, but it is fan fiction, like a pair that would be enemies to lovers. Now, everybody knows Harry Potter. I think you have to live under a rock if you don't know what Harry Potter is. And we know the famous enemies pair that, although it's not canon, a lot of us do love it. It is Hermione and Draco. So that is, if it were to have actually happened, that would have been a perfect enemies to lovers. They hate each other, completely despise each other in the books. They wish each other death at certain points. But in the end of Harry Potter, we see that they kind of become civil. And I think this is a lot where like most of us who really do love enemies to lovers, I think that's where like our love for that specific trope flourished. many of us were like super Dramione fans. I don't know if you were a Dramione fan. I was this huge Dramione nut. I loved it. I used to write and read fan fiction for that specific pairing. That was my live or die. And I knew it wasn't going to happen in the books. We all knew that Hermione was probably going to end up with Ron, even though I think that she was supposed to end up with Harry. But Harry ended up with Ginny, and Ron ended up with Hermione, and Draco married some off screen character that we barely know. So if this had gone the way us romance fantasy lovers like, it would have probably ended with Draco and Hermione together. And that would have been the perfect enemy to lovers trope executed. Now, the second trope that is very common in romance novels is the forced proximity trope. And for those of you that love this trope, have at it, enjoy it. But I feel that if it's not done correctly, it just feels forced. It doesn't feel natural. Everybody always reuses and uses that one bed scenario where the two love interests are forced into a small room, or they're in an inn or whatever, and there is only one bed and they have to share it. And that close proximity sparks, that intense desire that they want to be with each other, but they're holding back, or they don't end up holding back and then they do the so yes, I don't know. I love it, but I just feel like it is completely overdone. And most of the times it's not done correctly, and it's, I don't know, it just feels like too much. Like, if we were, I know we can't really base this on reality because none of this is actually going to happen in real life. Like, there's no magic dragons, there is no shape shifting werewolves, there is no magic being flung from wands, right? But if you're trying to base fantasy in some reality, we want to be able to actually pretend that we're part of the book, or like that we're seeing it and trying to connect with it. And when the two characters end up jumping each other's bones or just reacting a certain way that it feels unnatural, and they're being forced into that kind of scene, like with the one bed or the forced proximity trope, sometimes I just can't read it. It just doesn't flow right. It doesn't feel natural. Like, I read one book that I bought. It was a fantasy novel, and I ended up putting it down, and I wasn't able to finish it. It was just terrible. And this is a published book. It's you can buy it in store. And I remember I picked it off the shelf in Barnes and Nobles, and I started reading it, and it was just so bad. Everything was predictable. There were forced situations where it's like these forced proximity situations could have been easily avoided, and the author just chose to chuck reason out the window and force them two together, even though it didn't seem like it was supposed to be done that way. So yes, I do love a good written forced proximity. And hand it to Sarah J. Maas again. She did that forced proximity well with Feyre and Tamlin. I think it was done decently. And the next trope that I want to dive into is the love triangle. Who doesn't love a good love triangle, right? But I hate it when they make the second male lead just, he has no backbone. Like, give him personality. He can't be a yes man. I hate yes men in novels. They'll do whatever the woman says. She'll basically tell them to lay down, and he will do it, and he'll become her doormat. I just hate that. And then he gets left behind when she chooses the main male lead. Like, I really dislike that love triangle. Make a good love triangle where the male lead and the second male lead are actually complex people. They both are not yes men. They're not little puppies that are running after this female lead. I love when there's tension, romantic tension, but make it believable. Make it based in reality. I don't think anybody enjoys a doormat. Even in real life, if there was like a guy that was just following you and doing whatever you said, are you actually going to fall in love with him? No, you want somebody to pique your interest. You want somebody who will surprise you at times, in a good way, of course. But you don't want a doormat. And most of the triangle romances that I've seen, not even in like books, but like even in TV shows, in like I'm going to mention this, in like K dramas. I watch K dramas too. The second male lead sometimes is just such a wishy washy character. I want you to be able to do something. I want you to sweep the girl off her feet in a good way, not in the pick me, I'm so sad, I will do whatever you want kind of way. Kind of also brings me to the fourth trope. I don't know if this is actually a trope, but it's the way female characters are written nowadays. And I am going to get some hate for this, I know it. But I feel that a lot of the female characters written these days in these romance novels are just completely unrealistic, completely like unrelatable. This girl can do everything. She's super smart, she's super sassy, she need no man. She just can do everything. Now, is that realistic? No. Whatever she tries, she does excellently. She doesn't need to work for anything. And that immediately puts me off, whether it be a romance book or a fantasy book or even like a TV show. When the female lead is portrayed as this super strong female character, her whole personality is that she doesn't need anybody, that she is self sufficient, that she is practically godlike. And it makes for an boring book or show or whatever you're watching or reading. And that was one of the big problems I actually had with ACOTAR. Um, I felt that Farah was very annoying, very entitled, even though she came from a very impoverished and struggling background. I could not relate to her. I disliked her greatly. I didn't care for her. I felt that she was very ungrateful, very judgmental, and I felt like everything was being handed to her at certain points. Everything was going her way. Luck was always on her side. And yeah, I get it. This is a story that you're supposed to lose yourself in, and you want it to end well, and you want to root for the main character. But I just could not. I have a deep hatred for Farah. I really disliked her, and I read the first book, and I just there were times that I wanted to just stop reading, but a lot of the people were telling me, no, no, it gets better. Trust me, read it, finish it, get through the book because the second book is so good. You're gonna love it after the second book. And I'm like, all right. So I did finish the first book and whatever, like the ending scenes and everything, the trials that she went through, okay, yeah, that's fine. But there was nothing like spectacular about that first book. Now, the second one I did enjoy. I loved how she developed everything for Rhysand and Feyre, how they grew close, how it was done slowly. It wasn't rushed, and she did something that I think nobody was expecting, and now everybody copies her, which is not a bad thing. It's just that means that it worked and a lot of people enjoyed it. So this is a spoiler, but I think most people already know this, that Feyre doesn't end up with Tamlin and she ends up with Rhysand. And in the beginning, the whole first book is Feyre and Tamlin just being lovey-dovey and everybody thinks they're endgame. And I already suspected something right when she ended the first book because sometimes I don't read as a reader, I read as a writer, and that kind of I can't separate sometimes those two thought passages in my head, thought pathways in my head. So when I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, what would I do if I was the author and I wanted to keep the readers going and keeping them on their toes? So when she ended book one, I had this hunch that Feyre was not going to end up with Tamlin. So the whole second book was the setup for the real romantic relationship between Feyre and Rhysand. I loved second book, and then when she finished it, and then we know there's going to be some craziness going on the third book, I think that's when things started to go a little bit off the rails because Feyre then became this queen, this all-knowing, all-powerful woman slash girl. I don't even remember how old she is at this point, but she's only been practicing magic and being a fae for what, like 2 years maybe, and now she's making all these huge decisions for numerous fae that she she knows, but she hasn't lived their lives. She hasn't been in that world for too long, and she's the one that is making all these huge decisions and making judgments about others. And I couldn't finish this book. I think I got a little more than halfway through book 3 and I just put it down because it just she got too annoying for me. I couldn't tolerate her anymore. I thought she was too entitled. I thought she was too powerful. She was made to be too powerful, too entitled. She was making all the decisions. Everybody was looking to her for everything. And she's just this like 19, 20-year-old girl, maybe 21. I don't know. It doesn't matter. She should not be the one making all these decisions. And so I ended up putting this book down. And it was ruined by her being way too strong of a female character. Again, my opinion. I know I'm going to get so much hate for this. But to me, she just was completely unrealistic at this point. I feel like a lot of times women in novels are not being portrayed correctly, whether they be written by men, whether they be written by women, they are portrayed unrealistically. I think you need to be able to write a strong woman who is powerful and yet still realistic. You have to look at real life. She can't be loud and snarky and at the same time tender and gentle. It it doesn't happen. You have to give the woman certain qualities that echo who she is. Like if I was to write a strong female character, I have to give her flaws. She's not perfect. Women are not perfect. Men are not perfect. Nobody is perfect. And so when I'm reading these books and the woman in the book is becoming this character that I cannot relate to, I end up not finishing. And I do try to tell myself that this is not real. This is just fantasy. This is just my little escape from life. Like I when I read, I imagine everything very clearly in my head. It's like a movie for me. And like I kind of dissociate and I go into these books. So I don't know. I am deaf and blind to the world around me. I'm just in my novel reading. But when the writing and the characters are subpar, I just can't get invested in it. I can't feel myself being in there and relating to the characters. And finally, I'm going to talk about the last trope. Now, this is really based on everybody's opinion and based on each and everybody's own opinion. Some people love it, some people are okay with it, and that is that each romance novel has to end in a happily ever after. Now, yes, I am a sucker for a happily ever after. Sometimes I can't read a book unless I know it ends in a happily ever after because I'm the type that if it doesn't and the book was written incredibly well, it'll haunt me for weeks. I will just be walking around in a daze thinking about it, dreaming about it, and be like, what the hell did I just read? I can't believe that happened if it ends poorly, you know? And I feel like I spent my time and my emotions on this book and it ends up like in a disaster, in a tragedy. And so I understand why a lot of women and not women like their romance novels to end in a happily ever after because we want a good story. We want to have a happy ending for the two main characters that we've been rooting for. And on the flip side, as a writer, sometimes I don't want to write a happily ever after. because in reality, happily ever afters don't happen all the time. Actually, majority of the times, happily ever afters don't happen. And when I'm writing, I want to try to mimic reality, you know, but I also want to write a romance novel because I am a romance writer. And I gave into this trope. I originally, for the novel that I did publish, my original ending was not going to be a happy ending. It was going to be an open ending where the reader themselves gets to decide how they kind of want it to end. And I did write it that way originally. And then I was thinking, I don't think people are going to like this. I think they got too emotionally invested. And if I end it this way, they're going to be very unhappy. And so I ended up changing the ending to my book. So it's the one that I did publish, the one that's up on Amazon. I ended up writing a happily ever after, even though originally that's not how it was supposed to end. And that's because I'm also a sucker for romance, like a happy ever after. So yeah, those are the 5 tropes that I dove into today with you guys as I work on this piece, because this is the new design that I'm creating. It's that romantasy inspired blouse, sweater. I don't know what we're gonna call it yet, but it is inspired by my love for romantic fantasy. So guys, it's been great, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.